Welcome to a debate in the race for Pennsylvania's 17th Congressional District from the studio of KDKA-TV.
Hello and welcome to KDKA's debate between the candidates in Pennsylvania's 17th Congressional District. I'm KDKA News anchor Ken Rice. I'll be serving as moderator. Let's welcome the candidates. Chris DeLuzio, the Democratic candidate, and Jeremy Shaffer, the Republican candidate. I'll be joined in questioning the candidates by my fellow KDKA News anchor John Shumway and KDKA Director of Community Impact Lisa Smith. Our political editor John Delano helped arrange this debate. He was supposed to be part of our panel. Unfortunately, John is under the weather. Here are the rules for the debate. The candidates will have 1 minute for answers and an additional 30 seconds for rebuttals. The questioners may jump in with follow-ups if they feel it's appropriate to do so, and we'll make sure the response times are fair. And finally, each candidate will be given 90 seconds to deliver a closing statement. And so let's begin. Mr. Shaffer, the question goes to you first. Both of your campaigns are benefiting from financial support from your national parties. So tell voters what you disagree with your party on, whether positions on certain issues or perhaps your party's nominees for U.S. Senate and governor, or your party's leader in the House, in your case, Republican leader Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah. First, let me say thank you so much to KDKA. Thank you, Ken, Lisa, and John, for having us here. I think it's important for the voters in this district, in Allegheny and Beaver County, to be able to hear from us, the candidates, on the important issues. Right now, the system is broken. I'm a big believer in fixing a broken Congress, and both parties are at fault. I believe we need term limits. We need campaign finance reform. We need to end gerrymandering. Part of the issue you just brought up is the enormous amount of money that both national parties and super PACs have been dumping into this race. That's really not good for democracy, and it's something that we need to end. I've always been a bipartisan problem solver. I'm an engineer. I like to get to the root cause of the problem. I've stood up to my own party numerous times before, and I was elected as a Ross Township Commissioner by a bipartisan majority, even when the Democrats were a majority on the Ross Township Board. One recent issue where I disagreed with my party was on the bipartisan infrastructure bill. I publicly supported the bipartisan infrastructure bill because I know the importance of roads and bridges. And that's something that I was criticized for in the Republican primary.
Let me just follow up with asking for a couple of specifics here. Are you supporting your fellow nominee for U.S. Senate, Mehmet Oz?
You know, look, I am laser focused on my own race. I'm happy to answer questions about my race. We have enough problems in D.C. with Nancy Pelosi in control of Congress.
Are you supporting?
I'm not going to go down the bunny trails of do I support this candidate or do I support that candidate. I have always been my own person. I will always support my own issues, and I'll stand up to my party when it's appropriate. And I think voters saw the debate last night between Mehmet Oz and John Fetterman, and voters are capable of making a choice between which one of the two of them they should support.
Mr. DeLuzio, what do you disagree with your party on issues, fellow nominees, Speaker Nancy Pelosi?
Ken, thank you again for being here and having us here for an important debate about our congressional district and what we ought to see in representation in Washington. I'm someone who grew up right here in Western Pennsylvania, went off to the Naval Academy after the 9/11 attacks of my senior year of high school. Committed to keeping this country safe, serving this country in uniform, fighting for our democracy in my time after the uniform, and fighting for a union. I'm someone who understands deeply because I've lived the values of putting this country first above party. I'll do it in Washington. I'll be proud to join the For Country caucus alongside veterans of both parties. And look, I've been pretty clear and crystal clear criticizing this current administration, which has been debating, frankly, whether they might roll back tariffs against China. I think it'd be a terrible mistake. I've said that publicly. I'll say it here in this debate. We got to be doing everything we can to bring our manufacturing and our jobs back home, back to Western Pennsylvania, not giving the Chinese an excuse to undercut us and take our factories. And frankly, my opponent's business has been doing work to help the communist Chinese build out their own infrastructure.
Are you voting for and supporting John Fetterman?
And I'll happily answer the question that Mr. Shaffer just ducked from you, Ken. Yes, I am supporting Mr. Fetterman.
And Josh Shapiro for governor.
And I'll also answer the question that Mr. Shaffer ducked as well. I'm proud to be supporting Josh Shapiro for governor as well.
Nancy Pelosi, Speaker.
I don't know who's going to be running to lead the Democratic caucus. The last thing I'll be doing is giving up any leverage I'll have to get the best deal I possibly can for Western Pennsylvania.
Mr. Shaffer, 30 seconds to you.
Yes, look, there has been so many untruths told in this race. I was born to teenage parents. I always had to work hard in my life. I came from very modest means. I got a fellowship to go to Carnegie Mellon University. I started a company here in Western Pennsylvania with my good friend in our apartment at Carnegie Mellon University. Every single job that my company had was created here in Western Pennsylvania. And the group that my company evolved into, when we sold it to another company, every single job has stayed here in Western Pennsylvania. I've never sold any bridge software to China, and it's an absolute lie.
Jeremy, Mr. DeLuzio,
that is perfectly true. You can look it up. My company is
Jeremy,
every
your
job
time is
was
up,
here
Mr. Shaffer.
in the U.S.
Mr. DeLuzio, you have 30 seconds.
Mr. Shaffer, it's not true. Your company has been building infrastructure in communist China. You've helped them build bridges, roads, highways. You've helped them build their nuclear power facilities. That is selling out Western Pennsylvania workers. You've been an executive at this company for a decade. You've made millions. You've cashed in stock options to fund this campaign from that money. Just be honest with folks about it.
All right, we're going to move on. We're going to go now to John Shumway. John.
Gentlemen, let's talk about policing for a minute. Mr. DeLuzio, we are nearing, almost 100 homicides in Allegheny County this year alone. Now, your opponent says that you want to defund the police, and he links you to progressives like AOC and Summer Lee, saying that you have actually donated to their campaigns. You've responded by saying that Mr. Shaffer is lying. So let's get to the bottom of it. Have you donated to AOC and Summer Lee? And what exactly is your view on funding the police?
John, thanks for the question. I, of course, don't support defunding the police. Look, I'm the only person on this stage who's worn a uniform, carried a gun in a dangerous place to keep us safe. I know what it is that folks go through who risk their lives to protect us. I'm proud to be endorsed by unions representing cops, firefighters, prosecutors, those who do the work to protect us. And I know they need the resources that I'm going to fight for in Washington to frankly deliver for local departments across our district who need resources and training to keep us safe. I'm a parent of young children. Every parent around here knows they want to have their kids feel safe and know that they're secure going out in the world. I'll be fighting for those resources. And frankly, I don't need a lecture from a corporate executive about what it is to put yourself in harm's way.
Mr. Shaffer, you have said that you oppose defunding the police. And in the wake of what we saw with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, there's a lot of talk about moving resources over to community policing. So how would you handle that? Where would you find the money to do community policing without, quote unquote, defunding the police?
First, let me say my opponent, Chris DeLuzio, he did not answer your question. He has directly donated money to AOC. He's directly donated money to Summer Lee and to Bernie Sanders, people who are part of the Progressive Caucus who want to defund the police. He just held a fundraiser in Philadelphia with the head of the Progressive Caucus, who's actively been advocating for defunding the police. This is one reason that every single one of the Fraternal Order of Polices in our district has endorsed me. Well, I'm endorsed by Beaver County Sheriff Tony Guy and endorsed by Beaver County District Attorney Dave Lozier. And look, this isn't an either-or choice. I was a Ross Township Commissioner. We had a 40-person police force. You can invest in the police and support the police, and you can also invest in community development. You can do both, and we must do both. Our communities are suffering from record crime. And this is a direct result of progressives. I want to be part of the bipartisan caucus, the Problem Solvers Caucus in D.C. My opponent's already lined himself with the far left-wing caucus in his own party.
Mr. Shaffer, thank you. Mr. DeLuzio, 30 seconds.
Sure. Look, let's talk about Mr. Shaffer's donations. This guy's given thousands of dollars, thousands, to extremist groups, guns groups that oppose every single measure of common sense gun reform to keep my kids and your kids safe. He's given thousands of dollars, thousands, to groups that want to ban, that want to get rid of prevailing wage laws in this country, that want to take away protections for pre-existing conditions and jam an anti-union right-to-work law down our throats. So let's talk about donations. He's donated thousands to these extremist groups.
And since you brought up guns, let's talk about that for just a second. Mr. Shaffer, I'll start with you. And that is, I mean, we saw what happened in St. Louis this week. Of course, we're in this anniversary week for Tree of Life. Would you support returning to a ban on assault weapons in Congress? And if so, by the way, can you tell us whatever weapons you might have?
Yeah. So I'm an engineer. I always want to get to the root cause of the problem. We have violence that is plaguing our communities. We just had a shooting yesterday in front of Kappa, right down the road. We had shootings right across from on the north side, the Giant Eagle that I've gone to many times. We need to get the root cause. I'm in favor of keeping any type of gun out of the hands of violent criminals, out of the hands of people who are making threats, out of the hands of people who are mentally unstable. We need to enforce our background checks, and if there is any weapon that's an automatic weapon that is more deadly than a normal gun, then yes, I'm in favor of banning it.
All right, Mr. DeLuzio?
Well, he didn't quite answer the question because automatic weapons have been illegal in this country for a long time. I assume you know that, Jeremy. Look, the weapons of war that my friends and I carried in Iraq, we had the best training in the world. They were designed to swiftly and efficiently kill people in battle. They don't belong in our schools, our churches, our streets. I think an 18-year-old with no training should not be able to go buy an AR-15 and a high-capacity magazine. That's a pretty direct answer, and that's what we ought to do to keep our communities safe. That's the courage you need in Washington. And I'll work with Democrats and Republicans who are willing to do that and willing to take the tough stands to keep us safe.
Neither of you answered the second part of the question, so let me go back to Mr. DeLuzio. Do you own any weapons?
I do not.
I own a shotgun and a rifle I use for hunting.
Okay, thank you. Lisa?
All right. So our next question is for both candidates. We're going to begin with an answer from Mr. Shaffer. Last year, a resolution was introduced in the House of Representatives that said, in part, critical race theory serves as a prejudicial ideological tool rather than an educational tool and should not be taught in K through 12 classrooms as a way to teach students to judge individuals based on sex, race, ethnicity, and national origin. In your view, what is critical race theory? Do you have direct knowledge of it being taught in any K through 12 classroom? And would you prohibit its teaching as a member of Congress? Mr. Shaffer.
Yes, look, I think the most critical part of your question was probably the very last part. I'm a small government person. I believe that we don't need the heavy hand of the federal government in many different areas of our lives. That ultimately we need to empower our local school boards and the local parents to be able to make those decisions. I'm certainly not in favor of critical race theory. I believe we need to come together as a country, that we need to value each person regardless of their race, regardless of their natural abilities or any disabilities that they may have, that we all have an equality of worth, and that's what we should be teaching. And critical race theory basically teaches people to who is the oppressor, who is the oppressed. I don't believe that's what we should do, but I also don't believe that it is the federal government's job, it is not Congress's job to dictate local school curriculums. And that will be up to our local school boards, which are elected here in Pennsylvania, and the parents in the local school districts to make those decisions.
Mr. DeLuzio.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And look, I think I'm a parent of young children. I know Jeremy is as well. So many folks watching have children going through schools or preparing to go to school. You want to have a say on what your kid's taught, and that's your basic right, I think, as a parent. The last thing you need is Congress telling you and everyone else across the country what your local school should be teaching. That's not Congress's job. Congress can support schools with the resources they need and frankly, the support as they did provide during the pandemic to get kids back to school, to make sure that schools have what they need to get kids prepared for the economy of today and the economy of tomorrow. That's the job in Congress, not to go fight culture war battles or dictate to parents what their kids are taught in school. That's certainly not what I'll be doing in Congress. That's not the job of Washington.
As far as a definition of critical race theory, what would you say that is?
Well, look, I think folks argue all the time about what this might mean. To me, as I understand the question, you're talking about teaching kids, whatever age, about different types of racial discrimination or gender discrimination, whatever the case may be. But as I understand, the right has weaponized this into some sort of culture war fight. And of course, we should understand our history. We should understand the people around us. But the type of divisive rhetoric I hear out of the right is not something that we should be legislating from in Washington.
A rebuttal, Mr. Shaffer.
Look, we need to, I have 5 kids, and that we need to be teaching our children to love this country. That doesn't mean that our country is not without mistakes. Unfortunately, critical race theory all too often tells us that this country was built on evil, a foundational evil. Look, we have moved forward so much in this country. I love this country. This is the best country in the history of the world. And critical race theory is really designed by academic elites to try to divide this country and to put us into little boxes based on our race, our gender, or any other orientation that we have. To me, that's not a good thing.
A final word, Mr. DeLuzio.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
A final rebuttal.
Oh, well, look, I'm someone who believes deeply in this country. Obviously, I risked my life for our freedom here. And the last thing I'm teaching my children is they should do anything but love this country. They should. It's a country that I'm proud of, I think folks in Western Pennsylvania understand the value of service and patriotism and loving this country.
All right, Mr. DeLuzio, I'll direct this next question to you first. More than a year ago, President Biden was saying that inflation would be temporary, dismissing concerns that we might be in for persistent price hikes. Around the same time, his Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, said inflation posed only a small risk, and then a year later, she admitted she got it wrong. What could they have done differently, and what would you do now to bring down these high prices that we're all paying?
Look, people are feeling the pain every day, from housing to healthcare costs, gas to groceries. Costs are going up. It's going up across the planet. We're seeing rates well in excess of our rates here in this country, in Europe, for instance. And we have some things we can be doing, right? This Congress has just passed a law to allow Medicare to finally negotiate drug prices to bring down costs for seniors. Republicans and Mr. Shaffer are opposed to that. They don't want that change. But we're not going to bring down costs if we aren't serious about bringing back our manufacturing, stretching these supply chains. We never should have signed these lousy trade deals that shipped our jobs to Mexico and to China and allow these corporations to rip us off, chasing the cheapest labor they can find. We've got to stand up against 70-year record profits where they're gouging folks, especially in industries where they have the most consolidation, and we've got to bring these jobs back. We can't just keep sending corporate executives and people doing their bidding to Congress who are shipping our jobs to China. It doesn't make sense.
Mr. Shaffer.
Look, you're exactly right, Ken. The liberal left wanted us to believe that we could throw trillions of dollars after liberal priorities into the economy and that we wouldn't have any inflation. The people that Chris DeLuzio was supporting, AOC, Bernie Sanders, wanted to spend trillions and trillions of more dollars. Had it not been for Joe Manchin, we would have inflation at 20%, not just 10%. I was just talking to people in Moon Township yesterday. They're struggling right now, having to decide between gas and groceries and where to spend money. And winter's coming. Gas and energy prices are rising. This is a problem of the left's own making. We need to balance our budget. As a Ross Township commissioner, I balanced our budget with Democrats and Republicans. I balanced my budget in my own small business. We need to balance our budget, and we need to increase domestic energy production. One of the first things, my opponent, Chris DeLuzio, his progressive group wants to implement the Green New Deal. If you're happy with $4 gas, wait till it gets to $10 gas.
Time is up.
That's what we'll
Mr. DeLuzio, you have 30 seconds.
And what Mr. Shaffer didn't offer is a solution because he doesn't have one. In fact, what they want to do is to continue to slash taxes for corporations. He signed a pledge to not even raise taxes on any company. Amazon, which pays less taxes than any person watching this, he wants to keep their taxes low and will probably cut them. They're talking about targeting Medicare and Social Security benefits, and they're not going to stand up to the corporations who've been shipping our jobs and our factories overseas, because that's who pays their bills, that's who funds their campaigns, who funds their party. They're so weak, they won't stand up to big pharma to even get to negotiate drug prices.
Mr. Shaffer,
so that's simply not true.
Mr. Shaffer, 30 seconds.
I am in favor of a minimum tax for corporations. Every corporation should have to pay a minimum tax. To me, it's absolutely ridiculous that Amazon, that these companies don't pay any tax. Look, Mr. DeLuzio was a delegate for a socialist, for Bernie Sanders. Socialism and crony capitalism are two sides of the same bad coin. We cannot have big government spending. We cannot have monopolies and duopolies. I want to support small businesses, which is why I am endorsed by the National Federation of Independent Businesses.
Time's
when
up.
I had my own
Ken,
company,
I'd like
I paid far
time's up,
more
gentlemen.
taxes
We are moving on.
than Amazon.
We are moving on. Next question, John Shumway.
Let's turn to January 6th for a few minutes here. Obviously, we all know about the deadly assault on the Capitol and the people who died there, all designed to prevent the votes for president from being counted. 928 people so far have been charged in the insurrection. Now, Mr. Shaffer, your opponent and his allies have linked you to the views of President Trump. They've also linked you to the views of the nominee for governor here in Pennsylvania, who was there on January the 6th, claiming you're an extremist, and when it comes to protecting our democracy, that's where you fall. So here's the question. Do you minimize, as they have, what happened on January 6th? What is your position about the legitimacy of the 2020 election? And how do you assess the job of the special House committee looking into and investigating what happened there? And if you're elected, would you vote to continue that committee's work?
Look, every time I buy gas and groceries, when I see a newspaper article that says We had the largest number ever in the history of this country of illegal immigrants that poured across our southern border. I can tell you with 110% certainty that Joe Biden is our president and that he won the election. And that is what we have to deal with right now. I'm laser focused on trying to solve this problem with both parties so that we can reduce inflation, so that we can get our budget balanced. And that's what we need to be looking forwards, not backwards. I was criticized in my own party's primary for saying that I would have voted for the Pennsylvania electors, which would put me in the minority of my own party. We have a criminal justice system in this country, and anyone who commits a criminal act, whether it's storming the Capitol, whether it's being part of an Antifa riot, or some other criminal act, they should face the justice system. We have a functioning legal system, and that's where it should be. We should have to have primetime hearings on inflation, on the drug crisis, on our open southern border. That's what Congress should be focused on right now.
Would you continue the work? Would you vote to continue the work of the House Select Committee?
No, our Justice Department should be doing that investigation. The House Select Committee was a made-for-TV exercise. It actually got in the way of the Justice Department doing their own investigation. If crimes were committed, they should go through the normal legal process. We have functioning legal systems in this country, and that is what should be used to prosecute any violations of the law.
If crimes were committed, Jeremy, they stormed the Capitol and tried to overthrow our Constitution. They tried to destroy our government. These are people who went with bats and pipes and beat up cops and tried to install Donald Trump as president after he lost the election. You're not sure whether there were crimes committed?
So, Mr. DeLuzio, based on these answers, would you still consider your opponent to be an extremist?
I do. Here's the basic fact. Donald Trump led an insurrection that Doug Mastriano attended at the Capitol, attacking the government that I swore an oath to defend, that we all swear when we serve in Congress or anywhere else to protect. Jeremy Shaffer went on television and asked Donald Trump for an endorsement, said he'd be honored to have his endorsement. This is a man, whatever your politics might be, who tried to overthrow our government. He's been palling around, campaigning with, having support from and endorsements from insurrectionists, people who voted in Congress to throw out our votes. He had Kevin McCarthy in this district, a man who voted to throw out our election. So yes, I think he's a threat.
And the House Select Committee is
going
to come out.
Can I respond to that?
In just a second.
Because,
in just a second.
Okay.
Your time's in just a second. The House Select Committee is going to come out with some recommendations for things that should be done. What do you think should be done?
Look, we can legislate certain things. We should improve the Electoral Count Act so we can't have the kinds of shenanigans that the Republicans were playing last election, the Electoral College count. We should strengthen the Voting Rights Act and so much more. What I can't legislate is what's in the heart of Republican candidates like Jeremy and others who are eroding the norms and the rule of law and are willing to stand by because they lack the courage when there is someone like Donald Trump who is trying to overthrow our government. I can't legislate that change.
30-second response.
So I kind of feel like whiplash here. In the Republican primary, I was attacked for not supporting some of the very views that I'm being criticized for right now. I am pleased to be endorsed by numerous Democrat elected officials, by many independents, and by Republicans from all over the political spectrum. I'm endorsed by Pat Toomey. Pat Toomey, someone who obviously stood up to Donald Trump. And I'm also supported by conservatives because people know that our country is headed in the wrong direction. We need to put this divisiveness behind us and fix the big problems that are going on in Congress.
Well, we can't move past this when you have Donald Trump this week saying he's going to use the 2022 election in Pennsylvania as a dress rehearsal for his attack on our democracy in 2024. You have to confront this, Jeremy, whether you like it or not. And let's talk about Pat Toomey. Pat Toomey did one of the most deplorable things I've seen out of a senator in my lifetime when he blocked the PACT Act, did everything he could to block aid for veterans like me who were exposed to burn pits in places like Iraq, a guy who voted to send us off to fight that war and suddenly is counting pennies when it's time to take care of the veterans who answered the call. I'd be ashamed to have his support.
My wife and her family lived at Camp Lejeune. She's the daughter of a career Marine. I fully support defending our veterans and funding them when they face burn pits or bad water in different places. But look, you're accusing me of being extremist, which is far from the truth. I have a record. I've served on local library boards. I've defended all the books being able to be in the libraries, which my own party criticized me for. I was elected by bipartisan majority on a majority Democrat board as a Ross Township commissioner. I want to put this partisanship aside. I want to solve the problems in D.C., and this divisive language is just ridiculous.
All right, thank you, gentlemen, on that topic. Lisa?